Can I ask one very quick question to Dr. Fanintra?
Yes.
Can I just to check first the pronunciation of your name? Is it
Okay.
Fanintra or Panintra?
Panintra. Yeah.
Panintra.
Per
Yeah.
sound in the initial consonant. Yes.
Okay. Like
Yeah,
Pattaya,
thank you.
right?
Yes, yes, like Pattaya.
Good. So then it's Payao City.
Yes, Payao City. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm ready to start the webinar whenever you're ready, okay?
I have one question for my colleagues. Emilia in particular, did you hear from the panelists from Malawi? I haven't seen any response.
No.
No.
No,
Okay.
I haven't received any response. I see he's still here, but.
And Jennifer from Education International was reaching out to him yesterday as well.
Yeah, but I haven't received anything.
Okay. So June, maybe the teacher from Malawi may not be there.
Right. Okay. And do we have the panelist from
Nigeria?
Sorry, Nigeria?
No, I talked to her yesterday. She knows. I sent her a reminder this morning.
Okay.
Let's wait.
Okay, let's wait. So I'll be flexible.
Yeah. Otherwise, the speakers will have a little more time, which is always good. And also the questions and answers.
Yeah, and in the run-up show, you have backup questions.
Backup questions, indeed.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So I think, Rafael, we're ready to go. If you want to launch it, I will wait one more minute and start it.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you might be watching and connecting with us. I would like to welcome you very warmly to this panel that we have organized in the framework of the celebrations and the commemoration of the World Teachers' Day in 2022. My name is Carlos Vargas, and I work at UNESCO, where I lead the section for teacher development and also the Secretariat of the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030. I'm very happy to welcome you. Before I start, I would like to give you some practical information. This session has interpretation in English, French, and Spanish, so please select your language of preference at the globe button in the bottom of your screen. And also, we would like to ask you to use the chat section to comment on the presentations and the questions and answers button as well for any questions, any comments that you will have for the panelists. This will be constantly monitored, and we can bring it to the attention of the panel for the questions and answers session. For the speakers and panelists, I would just like to remind you to speak slowly to facilitate the work of our interpreters. And likewise, please put your microphone in mute when you're not speaking. However, you can enable your video and microphone when you take the floor. So I'm very honored to open this panel discussion, which builds on, as you've seen, the theme of this year's World Teachers Day, which basically resonates the key messages that we heard at the Transforming Education Summit in New York a couple of weeks ago. And one of those had to do with the necessity, with the utmost need of green education and rethinking education for sustainable development. So what we're going to do in this panel is we're going to basically unpack the idea of green education and what is it that it means. What are some of the pedagogical implications for teachers, for education systems, to support teaching for climate change, teaching for educational development and for sustainable development, sorry. And finally, for teachers to transform education from within. So the panelists will discuss today the conditions needed for education personnel from both formal and non-formal education to play a full role in the greening of education. The objectives for today's webinar are first to present this new green education partnership, its aim, purpose, and how it will function. As you know, green education was one of the spotlight initiatives from the Transforming Education Summit. So there's agreement, there's consensus on the need for this, and there were recommendations on the way forward. We will also share successful practices regarding education personnel, their preparation, the support, and professional development they need in order to address education for climate change. And to discuss also challenges to effective teaching and learning of climate change education in various contexts, and also to analyze what are some of the enabling conditions, some of the factors that make these interventions for sustainable development successful. On today's event, we will have a brief presentation of the Green Education Partnership, which will be delivered by my colleague, Ms. Won Jung-byun. She's a program specialist in UNESCO section for sustainable development. And then we will hear from an expert panel, which consists of 4 experts with diverse backgrounds and perspectives on climate change teaching and learning. We will hear from a youth representative. We will hear from a school teacher, from a teacher educator, and an education planner. Finally, a speaker working with a municipality, if they manage to connect, as there were a few technical issues, will provide some examples of how climate change and sustainable development can be embedded within the community. The panel will be presented and moderated by my colleague, Ms. Jun Morohashi, who is the chief of the section of Education for Sustainable Development here at UNESCO. And to conclude, we will have an open space for questions and answers. So again, we encourage you to use the chat function to introduce yourself, to interact, but also the questions and answers button to leave your comments and your questions as well. So without any further ado, please let me give the floor to my colleague, Won Jung-byun. Please, Won, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. My name is Won Jung-byun.
Sorry, Won. Your mic may be, your sound is very low.
Okay. In fact, I forgot to bring it
there
down.
It is.
Here it goes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carlos. So my name is Won Jung-byun, Program Specialist in the section of Education for Sustainable Development at UNESCO. And I'm very happy to present the current discussions around the Greening Education Partnership on the occasion of this important webinar on World Teachers' Day. So the greening education, what is greening education? From UNESCO's perspective, it is a concept that is rooted in the long-standing work of Education for Sustainable Development, or ESD, with particular focus on education's role to tackle climate change. And this is an effort to equip individuals, communities, and the wider world with the understanding, skills, values, and attitudes to engage in transformative action for climate resilient future societies. So in this regard, this is very much linked with the climate crisis that we are seeing today, and that is defining our future in the future. So in this regard, greening education is very much part of addressing this climate crisis and other environmental and sustainability challenges that we face. But unfortunately, in UNESCO's recent work, we have found that only half of the national curricula in the world make any reference to climate change, and only 23% out of 58,000 teachers across 144 countries that were surveyed in collaboration with Education International said that they can explain how to take action on climate change well, and only 40% said that they feel confident in teaching about climate change. So marking this important day of World Teachers' Day, it is very important that our education systems, including, of course, the teachers and educators, feel prepared to address this critical issue of climate change in their classrooms. And this is exactly why that the Greening Education Partnership has been launched as a global initiative to deliver strong, coordinated, and comprehensive collaboration among stakeholders on climate change education, to promote synergetic implementation, promote knowledge management and relevant research, to support action, and to advocate and communicate and monitor the progress globally. And this is rooted in the global frameworks related to climate change and education, starting from the Article 6 of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as the Article 12 of Paris Agreement, but also 2030 SDGs, particularly the target 4.7 and 13.3. And of course, UNESCO's global framework on education for sustainable development, called ESD for 2030, is the overarching guidance upon which we build the work around the Greening Education Partnership. So our efforts will be aimed to create and generate knowledge, awareness, and action for green and sustainable and just transition of our societies. And how we became and came to arrive at this Greening Education Partnership. Well, there has been various momentums created over the course of the past 2 years, particularly, especially starting from the UNESCO World Conference on ESD in May 2021, where a Berlin Declaration on ESD was adopted, which spells out that climate action should be a core curriculum component in all education systems across all levels and countries. And this was followed by the pre-COP youth event at Milan and first ministerial meeting on education at COP26 in November 2021 in Glasgow, where for the first time, ministers of environment and education gathered together to discuss about the important role of education in tackling climate change. And of course, last month, September 2022 in New York, this Greening Education Partnership was launched at the UN Transforming Education Summit, building on the discussions of the Thematic Action Track 2 on learning and skills for life, work, and sustainable development. So this whole global momentum and discussions have led to the production of the Greening Education Partnership. So now let us dive into the 4 pillars of the Greening Education Partnership. First is on greening learning. So this is to ensure that all our education systems, in particular, the learning content and teaching, addresses climate change and embeds it in everyday lives within the classrooms. And we would aim to have the number of countries to include climate education in their school curricula towards reaching and towards the target of year 2030. And secondly, greening schools will be the important aspect, particularly not only teaching and learning content, but also how the school facilities are run to make sure that they are climate resilient, and how school decision-making processes are run so that young people, students, and community members become part of that conversation, as well as how school engages with their local communities so that we can bring quality climate education with real experts and real relevance to the realities of the local communities. Thirdly, the pillar would be on greening capacities and readiness of teachers and policymakers. So this is very much relevant to our panel discussion today, because it is very important that teachers feel ready and capable to teach and address climate change education in their classrooms. So building capacities of teachers through teacher training programs, but also teacher training institutions will be our key points of action in this regard. And finally, the fourth pillar is greening communities, to make sure that communities are ready and resilient in the face of such climate catastrophes that we are witnessing today. So through the lifelong learning approach to develop skills, attitudes, and actions to foster community resilience and to make sure that all citizens are prepared to address climate change in their daily lives and daily work. So around these four pillars, the Greening Education Partnership has been launched at the UN Transforming Education Summit. And the final question will be, what is the next steps that we have to take? So in terms of the membership of the Greening Education Partnership, it will be an open, inclusive community of practice where we will invite member states and other stakeholders to join. So if you're interested, or if your organization, your country, your city is interested in joining the partnership and contributing to promoting climate change education, then please express your interest through this form available on UNESCO's ESD website. And secondly, there will be working groups around these four pillars of work where UNESCO serves as the secretariat, and further details of how we move forward will be discussed within these groups. And finally, I would like to invite you to also follow our discussions at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. On Thursday, 10th of November, there will be a special session dedicated to the Greening Education Partnership at UNESCO Pavilion in the Green Zone, and it will be also live streamed online. So please stay tuned through our UNESCO's ESD newsletter so that we will be able to share further information regarding this upcoming discussion. Finally, I would like to leave you with some guidance documents and teaching learning materials on this topic. Particularly, you may be interested to also join UNESCO UNFCCC webinar series on climate change education, which has been taking place since April until November, next month in November. And particularly the next edition, the 7th webinar, is focused on getting ready to scale up climate change education at COP27. And it will be taking place on the 25th of October through online means. So please join our next webinars. And these webinars are recorded and stored online. So you may be also wish to use this as teaching materials in your classrooms. So thank you very much for your attention for this short presentation, and we will be happy to engage in further collaboration. So please feel free to reach out to us at esd@unesco.org. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, Wong. So I guess we could now start the panel discussion. My name is Jun Morohashi, and I'm Chief of Section, as introduced by Carlos, to work on the Education for Sustainable Development. And our team, together with Won and other colleagues, we are in charge of the following up of the newly launched Greening Education Partnership. So as you saw, the third pillar, which is about the capacity development of teachers and policymakers as well, but as you could agree, I believe teachers have the role in all of the three pillars. Today, we will have a moment to dive into what's really happening on the ground. And I have the pleasure now to introduce our panelists. And we have 5 actually colleagues who accepted to join, coming from very different perspectives. Let me quickly introduce. So the first panelist will be Ms. Doris Muikali. She is SDG4 Youth Representative. Mr. Overton Simbeye, he is a teacher coming from Malawi, and he will present about his classroom perspective. The third speaker will be Mr. Gregor Toka. He's professor coming from Faculty of Education, University of Ljubljana, Slovenia, and he's presenting the teacher development, teacher training institution perspective. The next speaker will be Mrs. Oremei Skola Omokide. She is from Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, and she herself is an education planner. And finally, we have the pleasure to also have the last speaker, who is Dr. Panintra Tiranon. She is a professor teaching at the University of Payao, Thailand. And she's involved in the very interesting initiative around the carbon credit initiatives. So thank you very much, colleagues, to join today's session. And now I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, Doris. So Doris, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So we have a question for you. You are a representative of the UNESCO SDG for Youth Executive Committee, and thank you very much. We always appreciate your really refreshing and very engaging messaging. And you participated in the development of the Youth Declaration of Transformative Education Summit, which just took place 2 weeks ago already in New York. So yes, based on your expertise and also your involvement, I guess you're very active in your own community and network. In this declaration, decision makers are urged to invest in education for sustainable development, and particularly climate change education. So according to you, what role do you see for education, and especially for teachers, which is the today's scope of the discussion, when it comes to empowering the citizens of tomorrow and preparing them to deal with climate crisis and also to promote sustainable development? The floor is yours, Doris.
Thank you, June, for your question. I will try to speak very slowly. I've been accused of speaking very fast before, so I'll try my best to speak very slowly. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Doris Mercalli, and I am the youth and student representative to the High Level Steering Committee, which is the body that is tasked with following up the commitments of the Transforming Education Summit. And I'm also part of the young people that were leading the process with UNESCO and the Office of the UN Youth Envoy to launch the Youth Declaration at the Transforming Education Summit to really put across what are the demands and the priorities of young people. And as you have stated, that one of the demands is that young people are really advocating for sustainable education for sustainable development, and more specifically, climate education. And I know everybody has known that young people continuously have been sounding the alarm on the climate crisis. I mean, there's even now young people being affected mental health-wise because of the climate crisis. It's a very heavy issue. And for me, my mom is a teacher, so happy Teachers' Day to every teacher that is here. I mean, we all appreciate your work. So I think the role for teachers is instrumental in us challenging the status quo to call for governments and stakeholders to put more commitments for climate education. And the role I see for teachers, and I think the role that is for teachers, is how teachers can work to ensure that communities are integrating towards climate smart education systems, and that is greening for learning. And I think how teachers can do this is ensuring that when they're teaching climate education, it's not just in the classroom, but there's a wholesome approach to it, that they're involving the community in that sense. So I think that the climate crisis is not an issue that is just a Kenyan issue or an issue in Paris or just an issue in your own country. It's an issue that affects everybody. So when you're teaching climate education, I don't think you can teach it from an academic point of view. It needs to be as practical as possible, because even if you teach it from an academic point of view, you are risking the point where your learners are just going to be pointless and they're going to feel helpless. You're telling them the world is ending to some point and we need to do something about it. So it needs to be practical. It needs to showcase how young people and young learners can plug in, and not just young learners, but also parents, but also the teachers themselves and the community as a whole, to ensure that the entire community is resilient towards the climate crisis. They're thriving in the face of the climate crisis, and they're all taking action towards ensuring that there are more innovative steps. So I think how teachers can do that is coming up with the most just basic initiatives. I was recently in Milwaukee, and I met a teacher called Nicholas that is starting a garden in his school. And this garden is an initiative both by his students and both by the community. So he's using that garden to teach young people how to renew their values with the interaction with the planet, and also involving parents, involving the entire community. So it's bringing in a bigger conversation on food systems and how people can come up with more sustainable ways to produce food and how people can stop wastage. So I don't think the role of teachers is as complicated as we'd want to make it. I don't think the us moving towards change is us first asking governments to invest more money. We can start in just our local communities, but teachers starting more simple, innovative ways in which they can engage the learner and also engage the communities. So I think the most foundational way I see the role of teachers is ensuring that there's an wholesome approach towards climate education. It's just not in the class, it is practical and it involves the entire community. The other way I think is the role of teachers is ensuring that they are not only just teaching young people about climate education, but also ensuring that they are communicating effectively to young learners and also to the entire community about the role they play in challenging the status quo. We all know that the Transforming Education Summit was a way for us to call for more political commitment and more political momentum towards education as a whole. And in this context, more specifically, climate education. I think schools are everywhere in the entire world. I think it's a place for us to mobilize as a community. Because for me, I see school as community. I see school as a place where people come together to really see how an entire community can be prepared to address the most pressing challenges of our time, not just the climate crisis, but youth unemployment, mental health. So I think schools can be at the center of mobilizing for the climate crisis, and also seeing how we can bring in more investments to climate education. So I think it's a place where you can mobilize teachers, young people, and the entire community to really challenge the status quo. Young people have been on the streets calling for the climate crisis. I think it's about time that teachers, join this movement. I know they've been joining this movement through classes and just empowering young people that you have a voice and what you have to say matters. So just encouraging young learners to be part of the conversation, and just not the learners, but also the entire community. I think another way teachers can be involved, and here I'm talking to administrators, is really working with governments to come up with climate smart education systems. And here we're talking about building more resilient schools. I mean, everybody has seen what has been happening in Pakistan. You have a flood, you have a hurricane, and then school is disrupted completely. We need to work towards advocating for governments to come up with more climate smart education systems that are resilient, to ensure that schools are a safe haven for children and for communities, that learning doesn't stop the moment you're hit by a climate crisis. So it's again a hub where you're addressing the climate crisis but not stopping learning, but also it's a safe haven for the community that you've been working towards this issue with together. So those are the three ways I think we can address greening, like changing the climate education system to address climate education. And I think teachers are really core in part of that, because teachers they touch an entire community. So if you're addressing the most pressing challenge of our time, you cannot leave out the most crucial stakeholder, the person that is trusted most by a community, the person that is changing the minds of the people that will come up with innovative ways to address the climate crisis. So those are my 2 cents on how teachers can be part of the climate crisis. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say. I hope I spoke slowly. I tried.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Doris, also to represent this voice of young people, because we were really also impressed by the quality of interventions made by a lot of other young speakers in New York on the occasion of the test. And everyone is highlighting this, maybe some anxiety about this climate crisis happening and about their future. And as professionals, we are really responsible, and I really appreciated your comments about the teacher's role. So teacher is not only to, of course, support the academic learning, but teachers should play maybe multiple roles in this context of, if we define school as a community, as you said, I really like this idea, and schools can be indeed a hub for really collective change, which is a big responsibility, but teachers could also be creative, and their creativity maybe need to be supported, and young people could maybe also support teachers' engagement. So thank you very much. This gives really a good perspective to see the role of teachers in moving ahead with today's discussion. Thank you, Doris. And now I was informed that the next speaker, our teacher, Mr. Overton, he has unfortunately some technical troubles, and unfortunately he took his time to get connected, but this kind of technical challenges are often still ongoing in many countries, and especially in Africa. I really hope that he may be able to join later the discussion. So now with this, I would like to turn to Gregor. Are you ready? Yes, good. So Gregor, we had this interesting perspective coming from youth community presented by Doris. And yeah, we also often say, we said that also in Won's presentation, we are trying encourage member states to integrate climate change and ESD in the national curriculum. But we also saw that the teachers are also facing some challenges, including maybe they are not necessarily trained themselves to address those key issues. So from your perspective, what are the maybe some stories from your perspective of challenges that the teachers are facing, and how teacher training institutions such as yours can support? Over to you, Gregor.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to express thanks for invitation. And I also, like Doris said, I wish everyone really to appreciate World Teachers' Day, because it reminds us how important should be teachers in societies for multiplying ideas and practices. So going straight to the point of the question on challenges in delivering education for sustainable development or climate change education and the role of teacher training. So yes, teacher education has been challenged to engage with a range of social and environmental concerns for at least 50 years. And since Agenda 21, also for education for sustainable development, and later on for climate change education. So there are many issues we would need to discuss. I would just like to highlight some of them, and I will repeat some of the very positive and I think meaningful thoughts of Doris. And I really appreciate that she got the first word, because I think the youth are why we are doing all this on the long term, because we are talking about the future. So I personally think it's very relevant, several things, and I will just make to point some of them. First of all, higher education should be seen as a breeding ground for new ideas and social changes. So kind of a cultural evolution, which should ensure more sustainable future and especially global justice. And this is my first point I would like to emphasize. So global justice, especially in climate change education, is a very relevant and important topic, and very demanding how to implement it into different levels of education. Especially teacher education is very relevant in this way, because we always say we are on the same boat, but there are different tasks we need to take now and in the future in different parts of the world. So nowadays, I still think there are a lot of localizing thinking and still prevailing in these global questions such as sustainability and climate change. And we need to challenge this in teacher education, especially in so-called weird societies. So Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. And I'm coming from one of those. So so this is a challenge for also in my practice. So this inconvenient truth needs to be said, that when we talk about the adaptations for the future, we will have to take the big part in that. We have to adapt, And when we talk about education, as it was said by Doris, it's very much about actions. So it's not only about thinking about some academic level of understanding of the problems, but more also how to address them in practice. So, and this is challenging because it will affect our values and expectations that we now take for granted. And I think this taking actions is in this direction of change is something that we will need to globally rethink and see good practices, how to do that, because it's very difficult to change some habits, some lifestyles. So this is my first point. The second one that I think it's also very relevant is to emphasize that sustainable development goals are very wicked in terms of how to achieve them. And in education, especially in teacher education, it's very relevant and important how to address this on the systemic level, on how to address this complexity and not just present it as cause and effect, but more how to act. So the key is behavioral change in a sense. So we need to create real and realistic learning situations, like, for example, the one Doris mentioned with the school garden, something where students can relate and discuss more from the local perspective about more global issues. So, and in addition to that, I think it should be a lot of thought about pedagogical approaches that promote future thinking, system thinking, participatory, democratic decision making, and so on. So these things that will help us develop more global response to the societal problems or challenges, as I call it, rather than problems. So the third one that it's probably the biggest challenge at the moment is this lack of attention on interdisciplinarity still. This cannot be a project of one professor. Sustainability and climate change is just too complex and too important to be discussed only in disciplinary level. So, and this is still a huge challenge for teacher education. Teaching staff in particular, I would say. It's easier to change documents. And student teachers perceive this challenge, and they see it also in the next phase when they will become a teacher in the classroom in schools, where of course these schools in a sense, in terms of a system, still outdated and resistant to change. So this is, again, another very important challenge, this interdisciplinarity. And the last one that I would mention is the one that was already stressed with, from Doris, and that's what are the challenges, or she called it, if I just remembered correctly, demands of young people for action in sustainable development and climate education. So youth are disappointed towards adults, which is seen with public protests for climate justice, and also global, not global, but more, let's say, very common, more and more common environmental melancholy that could be seen in the younger generations, including students, university students. And this is, of course, something, that affects a lack of desires, or have some negative feelings, or low enthusiasm for the future. And this will affect also their future work, how to tackle this. So it's already a kind of a psychological barrier that teachers will need to face when addressing these complex issues of climate change education and education for sustainable development. So to summarize, present time really require a change in the architecture of the school environment in all levels. So, and that's why we are here. I mean, on this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregor, to put a lot of inspiring ideas within such a short time. I hope we can have more time later on to continue the discussion. But what I take note was, I think there is this very strong demand coming from the young people. And also they have, we talk a lot today, this eco-anxiety as well, which is also anxiety for probably teaching personnels as well, teachers and teacher educators. And if we want to make teaching learning to be more action-oriented as really desired by our young learners, we need to transform teacher education itself. But you also shared some resistance still on the ground. Maybe we still have to do a lot, but we now know a bit of ingredients. You mentioned about the need to do a lot more future or system thinking kind of approach in designing the actual teaching and learning. So I understood that it's not one day that we could make this happen, this behavioral change to which you also referred. But we are also aware that there are a lot of good practices coming from different teacher training institutions. So let's hope, and that's why it's very interesting to continue work as the team under this partnership. Now I have the pleasure to maybe welcome Mr. Overton. Thank you very much, Gregor. We will come back to you later. Mr. Overton, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Super. I'm really happy to have you back now. So we had Doris who talked about youth perspective, and now Gregor talked about the perspective coming from the teacher training institution. So now we go back to you as a teacher. So what is the reality in classrooms? Because we are aware that everyone, including teachers, know that we have to talk about climate change in teaching and learning. But from your perspective, what challenges in reality, being a teacher, to teaches about these big challenges, sustainability issues, for example, climate change? What are your experience faced in classroom to address climate change in your classroom? Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, as you have said, really, as a teacher, there are a lot of experiences and challenges that we face when teaching this very, very important topic. You know, like in our country, Malawi, the curriculum is quite well tailored. It starts all the way from primary, secondary, and tertiary, of course, changing with the level of the content regarding climate change, which is also embedded in the curriculum. However, because of this rampant activities done by various people around areas, even around the schools, to teach this topic, sometimes it becomes a bit of a theory, simply because we find that when you talk of how we can green our area, you find that the trees, the environment is already cut or finished. So to bring practical as elements in teaching becomes a bit of a problem. However, we end up trying to use the artificial way where you need to have maybe trees sown in the natural bed feeding for us to take care of them and up to the planting time. So in so doing, we bring an element of flexibility in the STEM. That's where we feel like it's a bit of a challenge. Other being that the areas were kind of covered, and to talk about climate change and what it brings elements of deforestation or leaving the ground there because of medical development. So in short, that's what I can say regarding the classroom situation and the students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Overton. So yes, actually, you confirmed some of the comments given by our earlier speakers about this theory part is important, and the teachers are urged to, of course, address climate change and sustainability because it's part of the curriculum. But where you struggle is indeed to make this theory part into practice and to propose more practical solution-based learning, also to really engage, right, young people, but also the community. And thank you very much also for sharing your efforts to try to link this big concept with the locally maybe available resources. And also that also helps to make learning more relevant. So thank you very much, Overton, and please stay connected because we will have another round of discussion. Thank you very much, Overton. So now I would go to next speaker, who is our colleague from Nigeria, Mrs. Omokide. So you are the education planner and specialized in curriculum. As my colleague Juan presented, the Greening Education Partnership has this component of greening learning, which is all about curriculum. From your perspective as an education planner, what would be the implications of this move to greening learning, providing that there is, I guess, a lot of efforts already happening to reorient and consolidate the curriculum for Nigeria, but bringing in new maybe topics of climate change or sustainability. How do you see the challenges? In other words, how does this, introduction of key topics, which are all relevant for our everyday life and especially for the future of young people, how would it impact your curriculum planning of your country?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so my name is Remy, like you said. I work with Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, NERDC. So my organization is saddled with the responsibility of developing curriculum for basic and secondary education in Nigeria. One of the things I would say greening education implications could be for the curriculum developer is that in a country like Nigeria, where we have education on the concurrent list, and then we have other states having like a large say on how curriculum is implemented at the state level, there is this challenge of implementation as the planners had intended. So for us, what we've tried to do at our level is to follow a two-step approach. So we focus in one on changing mindsets and like children mindsets, and we're starting early. So if you look at the curriculum, we thankfully our curriculums are due for a review. So it presents us with a window of opportunity to actually enrich and focus on greening the curriculum. But basically, there's also some challenges that we have in terms of the bureaucracies of the curriculum development process. But that notwithstanding, what we're looking at is looking at the pre-primary levels, introducing contents that would help these learners to begin to talk about these issues and in a way that they relate to. For example, one of the topics that we have in our pre-primary curriculum deals with relationship with the environment. And we're also trying to shift from just teaching them these things in terms of theory, like the past speaker, Doris, already hinted. We're trying to let them know that they can actually have like a relationship with nature. Teachers, so we're suggesting pedagogies in our curriculum that suggest that teachers can actually take students and learners outdoors to actually have like a one-on-one interaction with nature and see how some of the little things they do can have an impact on the environment. That said, we're also building in soft skills into the curriculum. So we're focusing on changing the behaviors, how learners are beginning to conceive ideas and the impact of their ideas. One of the soft skills that we focused on in the curriculum, that we're focusing on our reviews on now, is global citizenship, digital literacy. So in designing contents for the curriculum, we try to wrap them around these issues so that Learners are not just learning content in isolation and having the knowledge, they're also understanding how this can impact and have like a snowball effect. Even though it's a local activity, it could have, you know, a global impact. And that's one of the things we've been doing. Recently, my organization partnered with the Department for Research and Project Center, DRPC, and we reviewed our civic education curriculum. And some of the issues that we tried to focus on that curriculum, for us, it was like a window of opportunity. So we tried to bring in as much issues on climate change as we could. And some of the contents that we were able to bring into the curriculum at that level included issues on human rights abuse, climate change, peace and conflict resolution, especially because not just that these things local, but in the context of Nigeria, these are also some of our realities. One of our challenges again that we face as curriculum planners is that at the organization level, we want to be futuristic. We want to develop curriculum that anticipates issues and then make sure that learners are ready to tackle these issues when they do arise and if they do arise. Unfortunately, because of the bureaucracies currently experienced in curriculum development, we find that we're still playing catch up. And we hope that this will change, and with proper correct processes in place and the funding in place for curriculum development activities, that we can actually predict and put information ahead so that learners are already equipped and already know where the world is going in terms of content. So basically, those are for us the implications that we see, that it's going to also mean that we are all rethinking how we do these curriculum developments in terms of contents and in terms of pedagogies, because those are like, for us, those are like the two key areas that we feel like we can engender the change. We are putting pedagogies that encourage learners to collaborate. So we say take action. So it's not just, we don't just put an activity in the curriculum, but we put opportunities for learners to actually take action, to think about how they can take action, and also work in small groups to see how they can bring ideas, so come up with ideas on how they can take action. Some of these curricula, just for information, some of these curricula that we've put in place, that we've been reviewed, they're still undergoing processes to get approval. So if you go into the schools, you may not see them in the school curriculum, in the school being used yet, but we're hoping that by the soon as the NCE meets and we get approval, then these curriculums can be rolled out for use. And so we're hoping that in the coming few years, once this curriculum has been implemented, at least for 1 or 2 years, we'll begin to see more aware, more conscious, environmentally conscious learners. And we're starting this from as early as basic education, pre-primary education up to secondary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, RMA. I have maybe one very quick follow-up question. When you review the curriculum, do you organize consultations and maybe involving some teachers in the dialogue?
Yeah, thank you. So for our curriculum development process, we do a very wide and extensive consultation of stakeholders. So we have teacher educators, we have policymakers, we have NGOs, civil society organizations, so people and we also look for subject panel experts. So we consult widely with the university, the colleges of education, and even with the field, like people in the industry. So we go into the field and see, okay, what sort of skills are required, today, what sort of skills are required for today and for the future. And so we begin to come up with our contents based on these inputs from the experts and stakeholders.
Thank you very much for this additional information. Yeah, it's really encouraging the way it's happening in your country, and especially good to know that there are some always windows of opportunities. But I also appreciated your assessment that the implementation of the good intentions is still a challenge. I guess it's for many countries. It's quite a similar situation. So once again, thank you very much for sharing this. And you also mentioned about a bit of new ideas to bring learning outside of the schools buildings. And you also mentioned about the outdoors and also to link it more with the local reality, community context. And here comes the last speaker, who is from Thailand, Dr. Panintra. Are you ready to come in?
Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. So, one question. We know that learning takes place everywhere and not exclusively, as I said, behind school walls. And learning is, of course, a lifelong learning and also life-wide process. And we are also all aware that many children and young people worldwide are out of schools. We have to take that in our consideration. Some municipalities and communities are also taking proactive, interesting initiatives to foster this awareness and learning about what's happening in their real life situation and seeking some behavioral changes among the people. In your location, so Phayao City in Thailand, you have a very interesting initiative around this carbon credit. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience and also main achievements regarding behavioral changes and also other challenges? Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Phayao is in the northern part of Thailand, near Chiang Mai. The University of Phayao and Phayao municipality, we work closely to train the local intellectuals to have knowledge of the bio-circular and green things. And we also have the bio-circular green class, or what we call BCG class. And we train the local intellectuals to pass on this knowledge to all of the villagers or communities around them. As I mentioned, that the university work closely with the municipality in Phayao. So we set up semi-formal education on BCG class for them, and we aim to reduce carbon emission in Phayao municipality area. Around Phayao Lake, which is the 4th largest lake in Thailand. This is the first year objective. And in the second year, we hope that we will cover up this, to reduce the carbon emission for the whole province. The mindset and global mindset is one big thing that our team found to be the main cause of environmental problems in Phayao. So it is our duty to raise awareness of the local laborers, local youth, and also disabled people in Phayao, which is our target group. BCG class or bio-circular green class has been set up in local learning spaces around Phayao Lake. But anyhow, the learners can transfer the credit to the university as well. The learners will learn to make use of waste to create eco-friendly products to earn a living, which they can increase 5% of the income through the BCG class, which I think is parallel to the green class. Global mindsets of the environmental responsibility is also measured. We found that it increases significantly. And the other learning process we use is called the cross-learning process, which we mix up the diverse group of learners from different districts in Phayao. For example, we set up the role model who is in one district to teach the other district of the BCG ideas. This is what we have done across Phayao. And when one sees the green showcase from the other areas, they gradually change their mindsets because they have seen the role model from other districts. And we measure the carbon emission also through learning process. this learning process, which we call the cross-community learning class or BCG class, can reduce around 5% of the carbon emission. This is measured by a certified carbon credit expert in our team. And one of them is here with me today. She sits besides me. However, there are still some challenges, such as the accessibility of local teenagers to the information of environmental problems across Phayao City. So I think accessing to this information, this basic information about the environmental crisis in Phayao is necessary because it will increase awareness of this crisis. And the way to measure one other thing, which is our challenge in Phayao City, is that how can we evaluate the carbon emission in municipality into the more rigid numbers, and also to link them to the SDG goals of the century. So this is all from Phayao City. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pinintra. It's very interesting to know that using the university, I think Gregor was also talking about the role of higher education institutions, and you are really connected with a lot other actors and also with the municipality, young people, people with disabilities, to try to make your community zero emission and also climate resilient, which is a very interesting case. And probably you also came to observe some behavioral changes, because we can do a lot by doing things concretely, learning by doing, but still also this challenge of accessibility. That was actually an interesting point for me to take note. Accessibility to information on environmental problems for young people. This is just a very quick follow-up question. Why? Because the schools community are not necessarily all connected with this movement, or would you have any observations about this? How do you analyze this?
Through the observation process we also have research team to monitor this, and we think I mean the big data is important for youth, disabled people to access about the environmental problems around Phayao area. I think more open data should be like provided and connected. Like you said, maybe we can use the forum floor to discuss about this and make it happen to like opportunity for everyone to access to the big data of the province or the municipality in Phayao.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pinintra. So this comes to the end of the first round of the discussion by the panelists, and thank you very much for putting your inputs to the discussion. And also we received some interesting questions from the audience posted in the discussion chat box. Let me read it, and also we could have another round of inputs from our panelists. So one question is, will there be any financial burden for the shift towards greening education? If yes, how will the developing countries manage keeping the view they are under the havoc of climate change and global warming? And also another one, could the religious and social forums can be used also to enhance the following and implementation of greening and education at the policy and the implementation level? Another one coming from a colleague working in an NGO, I would like to have your opinion on the following. We strive to also include environmental education and build climate resilience in our education programs. However, I struggle with the fact that our target population is affected gravely by climate changes, but that in fact they are far from being the ones causing the problems. How do you deal with this issue? We can introduce this topic, but it feels like we need them to become more educated and resilient because as Westerners are not willing to change. And this is a very interesting remark. So this is really like an open conversation, but also probably linking a little bit back to what Won presented with the 4 pillars, to be able to see that, you know, the goals presented in this partnership, what gaps do you still see? Also providing these comments, I think coming from very interesting comments coming from our participants. What gaps do you still see, and what opportunities and the way forward? And I would like to start just to change the order of the intervention. Dr. Pinintra, are you ready for reacting to those?
Okay, sure. About the gap, right? The gap that we still see in the community. I think the one thing is it's a big challenge in our community is that we should engage the whole community of Phayao, especially the informal laborers, disabled people, and also youth, to the BCG class or the biocircular green class. It should be intensively done in Phayao. I think we have one opportunity today because we have got a huge flood in Phayao municipality. And as the community has faced this problem by themselves, so it is our, our chance to tackle this problem with them because they have faced it by themselves, and it is quite a severe case. So we are going to set up one big class or forum in Phayao about the greenhouse effect and how to measure the carbon emission. Make it simple for the community to understand so that they can measure or evaluate by themselves when they produce their products, local products, for example. So this is the gap, for the whole community to raise awareness about, to have it increasing the awareness of the environmental problem or the greenhouse effect. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Oremei? Would you like to continue?
Okay, thank you. So for me, coming from the curriculum development perspective, I feel like, first of all, we have gaps in terms of, in our Nigerian context, we have gaps in terms of proper funding of the education sector. Curriculum needs to be timely. And unfortunately, that is one challenge that we still deal with. We want to be able to roll out the curriculum in time so that we are not playing catch up with problems that have presented themselves already. Because if the information gets out there early, then the learners in themselves would have not only developed knowledge and capacity for when these eventualities happen, but they would also be change agents in their small spheres of influences. So for us, that's one major gap that we still have, because even though we have all our plans in place and how we want to ensure that the kind of contents we want pupils to be learning in school, we're still restricted by the fact that the processes required are elaborate and requires funding in order for them to meet with the timelines that are scheduled for curriculum review. For us in NERDC, we have like a 5-year lifespan for the curriculum. But at the moment, our curriculum has been in use for over 13 years. So it's long overdue. So what we've been able to do at our level is to seek other sorts of partnerships. And for me, that's why I said it presents also a window of opportunity for us to actually ensure that the key issues, the key things that learners need to be talking about and need to be learning and need to be thinking about are put in the curriculum at this time. because we hope that the funding that that have been that are required would be released soon, because the council is also in negotiations with the government, and we're hoping that we have all that funding soon. And once that happens, then we can actually deal with some of these issues, the contents, the pedagogies, and all of that. Another gap that I see is the fact that education here is still on the concurrent list, and the fact that states still have such a big impact on what is taught at their own levels and how the curriculum is implemented. So even though there is a plan in place and there is a national curriculum, we still find situations where the states are having concurrent curriculums, if you ask me, and this also sort of challenges the initial ideas and conceptions that the planners originally had for greening the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oremi. I also have one more follow-up question to what you have said in the first part.
Ahead.
You refer to the opportunities, windows for opportunities, and maybe the partners should come in. Who could be the key partners for your perspective, who could really help this intended curriculum become the reality?
Okay, I think for example, we can actually have a partnership with any of the international development partners who have interventions in areas of education for sustainability. We had some talks with UNESCO in the past regarding education for sustainability. We've not quite gone, we didn't quite go far with that discussion, but basically any organization whose mandate is on this can actually push this agenda, and we can like there's something that Gregor said earlier in this conversation where he said that it's beyond one teacher. So like I said, we partnered with the RPC to review the civic education curriculum, and when that curriculum is finally implemented, you would find that some of these issues are addressed. But even though it's like a core subject, civic education, that's why we chose to do that partnership in civic education, so that every child would at least have the opportunity in one subject to come across those contents. But we feel that these can actually be put in other subjects, so it can be interdisciplinary. So even if you're in the sciences, you're in the social sciences, you still find that you engage with these issues in your various spheres as they influence your subject. So those are the kind of thinkings that we have, that if the organization who have interventions in these areas can actually partner with us, and then we can, now that the curriculums are due for review, we can all work together to see that the key issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this sharing. So next, can I go to Gregor?
Sorry, just a clarification. So you want me to respond only to the Greening Education Network, or would you like me to also comment some of the questions that were raised?
Yes, everything is possible. So if you could also address some of the questions coming from the audience, that would be super too. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So first of all, maybe a few words about the Greening Education Network that I had a privilege to see beforehand. So some ideas. So I think it's this network can help multiply the idea of sustainability, and I think that was the main goal of it. So to make it more global and to pinpoint this greening capacity and readiness, there have been different good initiatives in efforts in many pockets of good practice up to now. So I think the main gap or the challenge is now how to make these pockets into more a network or a global perspective, or the main, let's say, focus of education. And I've been part of these pockets for a long time. So either at the academic level with some UNESCO chairs in Europe, or Okayama University in Japan. And of course, we are struggling with the same problems. And I think that the networking is actually helping exchange also these frustrations in a sense, but also looking for the solutions. So I think this is a very relevant thing. And also there are initiatives, even in Slovenia at the moment, to introduce more systemically, as it was just discussed before, in the curricula, education for sustainable development and climate change education. So this is, I think, one of the major challenges, and I completely agree with what was just discussed before, that it's sometimes a problem of informing them, but at the same time, we lack means on how to act properly. And if I just focus on climate change education, I mean, it's quite depressing if we just inform them about the causes and not doing anything. In this case, it's better not to discuss it at all. So it's very relevant that we also look at the adaptations within the societies. Different societies around the world are differently affected by climate change at the moment. And we need to address this, how to adapt, how to behave, how to adapt infrastructure and so on. I think this is, education has a very important role in this process of societal change. And I would just like to make a short answer to the second question that was raised about the religious and social forms and their potential for greening the education. I think it's very general answer, but it kind of refers to my first first part of the discussion today, that the best of religious or indigenous or scientific knowledge needs to be combined together, because all these kind of structures culture, structures certain societies. So we need to find the best wisdoms out of each and create new reality that it's more sustainable. So I would say yes to the answer to the second question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregor, for this very elaborated thinking and quickly answer to some of the questions. We maybe come back to some of the additional questions, but before doing that, I would like go back to Overton, if you are ready. Maybe he has some issues. So probably we could start with Doris, if it's okay, Doris.
I'm here. So do I answer the same question or?
You can just share any of your thinking about this global education, greening education partnership, or to any of, the comments provided by other speakers or questions raised by the audience. Feel free.
Oh, fantastic. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges in terms of even this very important partnerships that is trying to advocate for more climate education investment is that most stakeholders see climate education as a way to create awareness about the climate crisis. They don't understand that it's an investment to solve the climate crisis. They don't understand that you're investing in an entire new generation of people, an entire new generation of learners that have better relationship with the planet, and not just a better relationship with the planet, but have innovative ways to address the climate crisis. Whether you're talking about smart agriculture, whether you're talking about green energy, whether you're talking about creation of green jobs to solve unemployment. So I think one of the greatest challenges when you just generally talk about climate education to the public is people stop at education as a way to create awareness. People do not understand that education is a radical equalizer that can create a better environment for everybody. It's a foundational element in ensuring that we transition better in terms of sustainability, and we create a better life for marginalized communities, for people that are experiencing floods in Pakistan, for communities that are experiencing heat waves in Europe, for anybody experiencing drought in the Horn of Africa. So I think the biggest challenge is we need to shift mindsets from thinking that education is just for creating awareness, but it's an investment, a long-term investment. And I think also climate education should just not be about the learners. It should be, as you were talking about, many people have mentioned about long life learning. Everybody should be investing in their climate education. Everybody should be looking continuously to see what is their contribution in terms of addressing this crisis, either in their community, in their country, and even in their sphere of influence. So I think climate education should just not stop at informing the learner, but as you're saying, it's depressing when you're just informing the learner that the world is coming to an end. It needs to be about investing in more innovative solutions. And I think the opportunity, as part of the young people that really worked on the youth declaration, it was very involved in the Transforming Education Summit, is that we need to transform education in this way. And the opportunity is to work with every stakeholder to ensure that this happens. I don't think governments are just going to give the money. Honestly, if they did, they would have given it a long time ago. I think that every person that really cares about this issue should be working towards challenging the status quo. Everything that has been said here is fantastic. A teacher can come up with a gardening initiative in their school. A teacher can be invested in the learner's process and even find ways to teach young people about green energy, but that's not enough. At the end of the day, there needs to be massive investment for us to transform education and to be able to get all the benefits that we need to get from education in terms of investing in the climate crisis. So I think the Greening Partnership, I hope that the stakeholders that will be part of that particular partnership will be working to get in financing, especially for communities that need it the most, developing countries that have contributed very small percentages to the climate crisis, to ensure that they're building climate resilient communities through education. So I think that's the opportunity. And I think that everybody who's here, every stakeholder should be working towards that, demanding for better investment in transforming education, and more specifically, better investment in terms of climate education. And to do that and to make it more practical, to make it to resonate more with the learner, you need money to do that. So I think the next thing we should be thinking about, and the next opportunity for this partnership, is seeking financing to do that and to ensure that we transform education and everybody is ready to thrive in the face of the climate crisis, whether you're a learner, whether you're a teacher, whether you're just somebody in your community who just wants a better life for everybody who is your neighbor. So I think that's the opportunity moving forward. I hope I spoke slowly. Oh my God, I'm trying, people.
No, you did speak clearly and slowly and really in convincing way. I took particular note of this strong message, better investment, not only to create awareness on the climate crisis, but to resolve this problem. Yep. And you also highlighted that climate change education and greening education partnership is not only for learners, but you highlighted the fact that it's everyone's business. It is about the lifelong learning, and also we also use this term of life-wide learning, right? Which needs to really be put in place. But can you tell us a little bit about your observations? What are the missing pieces to make this happening? And do you have one good example, concrete one, from your own work?
Oh, yes. I mean, I'll just, to answer that question, I'll just go back to what Gregory was saying about how climate education can be very depressing. It is very depressing at times. And after I left New York, I went to Milwaukee, and there's a teacher who was equally concerned and was asking me, Doris, I want to teach young kids that are 10 years old about the climate crisis, but I'm worried that I'm going to affect their mental health by telling them there's this massive problem and you guys might not live enough to enjoy the beach. So how do I talk to young people about the climate crisis? And I told them that I don't think you should approach it that you have this massive problem that you should be concerned about. I think what you should tell people is that you have a definitive problem of your generation, and that this is an opportunity for you to contribute to it. It's an opportunity for you to take responsibility, to be part of solving that issue. I think you motivate a person when you tell them that they are part of the solution than when you tell them that there's this massive problem that I really am not also very sure how you could plug in. So I think moving forward, not just with young people, but anybody in a community, is to really call upon people of goodwill to take responsibility in addressing the climate crisis. And back to your question about a concrete example that I've seen in terms of climate, I'll use a very recent example. I mean, I went to Milwaukee, and you know, the US has its own problems, of complex society, but there's this teacher who was I was going back to the gardens that has been talking to his students about food deserts and how they can be part of creating better, healthy meals for their community. And he has an entire program about how teenagers can be interns in different schools, in different like gardens in the community in rural Milwaukee. And these kids come together every summer, and they have small portions of their garden where they're responsible for growing food, responsible for ensuring that that food is sold and they're making money and planting back that money into the community. So in as much as I think that that's not the only solution to the climate crisis, like individual responsibility, I think those are steps to ensuring that our community is involved, because there a student understands their relationship with the planet by having better food systems. A parent can see the benefit of investing in that, and the entire community can feel the benefit because they're seeing tomatoes, right? They're seeing cabbages, they're seeing fresh food that these children are growing. So I think that's one of the most recent examples that I've seen. And I also work in the humanitarian space within the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. I'm in the climate advisory group. So in my work in terms of humanitarian response here, I continuously see young people that are showing up to respond to climate crises like drought and floods. And the thing that breaks my heart is that these young people go home not understanding their contribution to the bigger conversation of the climate crisis, because they didn't have climate education in school. They're not privileged enough to see how complex this issue is and what their contribution is in the global scale. So I think in terms of even just climate education, sometimes it's just not to inform our person, but also to pat them in the back and tell them that you're contributing to something bigger than yourself. You're taking responsibility to a definitive issue, and moving forward, you should keep on going. So those are my two examples. I hope they are concrete
Super.
enough. I mean,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Thank you very much, Doris. Yeah, excellent example. Overton, are you back?
Yes, first and foremost, let me apologize. My gadget has not made me better. I've missed some pieces, but now I'm back live and I can hear you. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up from where possibly I hinted during the time I was giving my presentation regarding the curriculum. Yeah, the curriculum that we have been using has taken some time. Now, this year, the government is busy in the process of trying to review the curriculum. Now, as such, we are very, very hopeful that this issue of climate change or green education will be taken on board, because even politicians or parliamentarians are geared into the same because of the issue that we have been experiencing in our country, especially disaster risk areas like flooding, where many people lost their lives, schools, learners stopped schooling. All those things have made the government to make sure that this issue of climate change or green education is taken on board and in a very, very serious manner. As somebody from the teacher training, I will be very happy, especially that being specialists will always go for the curriculum review and the change. It's my prayer and view, especially even as a unionist, that this one will be very serious taken on board to make sure it comes out clearly in the curriculum. It should be broader, if anything. It should be a learning area on its own to cover several aspects, because leaving that would mean actually singing the past song. You see, in the past curriculum, there were just elements of the curriculum change coming in as topic, bits here and there, while actually focusing on the learners. So learners had to very, very inadequate information regarding the same. But this time, with this year's process of reviewing the curriculum, this climate change education will be taken seriously. And I'm sure one of them will be there in viewing these topics. It will come clear. So that maybe it should be taught for that. It should be a course and so on. But it's very global. It's not only Malawi, it's the whole world. So it's high time. We cannot afford just talking rhetorically or else theoretically. This time we need to go flat out on the ground, practically. So that if be it a standard 5, 2, 4, 3 arena, should actually also be in a position to express or issues that may lead to maybe climate change and the impact or repercussion that may come thereafter. Even when they go to their homes, they can also be teachers for the villagers who actually may have missed that particular knowledge regarding greening the world. It was a country which is not green in life. It's not necessarily a good country. Otherwise, we know socio-economic impact of the global, the climate change and how people have been affected, even otherwise. So, as Malawi, and particularly from a teachers union of Malawi, that is very linked to see into the welfare of learners as well as you at large. Would like to make sure that this topic is no longer necessarily a topic; it should be a course. I think that's very important. That's what I wanted to also include in the same. So Malawi is geared. We are doing the curriculum this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Overton, for this very strong call for action, really to continue to working together. So we are very much looking forward to, taking this forward together. And coming from you as the real life teacher, this is really moving and powerful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Overton. Please to take care. Okay, so this comes to the end of this segment of the panel discussion. And thank you so much once again to all of the great speakers who really, warmed up our thinking. So I hope today's discussion is really a good start for our joint work together. Thank you very much. Over to Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June, for your expert moderation and for keep this conversation going, which I know you will continue going for quite some time after this webinar. But I'm very grateful to you and to my colleague Juan as well for the presentation of UNESCO's Green Education Partnership, and also to all of our speakers. Thank you very much to Doris, to Overton, to Gregor, to Omoreji, to Panintra, and thank you very much for these reflections. I think the panel discussion has illustrated that effective green education goes beyond the classroom and the school. It touches upon educational infrastructures, educational planning, policy decision-making, financing was mentioned, of course, a few times, but as well as communities awareness, and engagement. That was one of the points that was raised about how the greening of education, how addressing climate change, education for sustainable development is a common and a collective endeavor. This is something that is reminded also in UNESCO's recently published report on the futures of education. This new social contract for education has to include a change, as you have said, of mindsets and of responsibilities. I would like to flag just probably 3 issues to conclude that I think are good takeaways for, as we said, to continue our conversation. One of them has to do, it has been brought up in the chat by the speakers a number of times, the issue of global justice. I think it is important to say that climate change has differentiated impacts upon different peoples, including indigenous peoples, including women, including those in remote areas, rural populations, etc. So it would be important to frame also the issue of climate change in the differentiated effects that it has and how it might exacerbate existing inequalities. At the same time, an issue of global justice has to do with how and who produces most of the waste in the world, which is something that has been mentioned as well. This is not solely something that is of concern to certain geographies. I think it is a global concern, and we need to revisit the forms of production, the forms of consumption, and what that can cause in terms of, once again, global justice, and as one of the panelists mentioned, global climate justice. Part of this justice has to do also with epistemic justice, which is how we think of the world and how we think of Earth and how we think of ourselves within the world, which we can learn from different cosmovisions, from different worldviews, of indigenous peoples, for example, that have a different relationship with Earth altogether. So it has to do with that change of mentality. It has to do with that change of attitudes, the values, the frameworks that guide our everyday actions. Ethics of care, the ethics and the responsibility for caring for one another and for the planet as one being is something that should be instilled, as we have heard, in curriculum, in teacher training, and particularly teachers play a very important role. We know this transcends education, and we know that this transcends teachers, but I think teachers are a key actor to do this, to build and bridges and to link, as has been mentioned in this panel, theory and practice. We know the causes of climate change. We know the science behind it. What we need to move forward to is how we actually change those attitudes, those behaviors for people, again, to have a responsibility and to act upon it. This calls most certainly for a change of mindsets, and in which teachers have always played a great role. So thank you very much. We invite you to continue this conversation, to engage in this green education partnership that UNESCO is leading. My colleagues will be able and have shared the link. So we invite you to stay in touch. And I wish you all a very happy end of the Teachers' Day week and a good continuation of your afternoon, morning, or evening. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.